Hey, this is episode 44 of Gen X Amplified, and today we have a very familiar friend and voice of the podcast. That's right, a repeat guest, world-renowned author, trainer, and speaker, Carmine Gallo is back. He is back on the show to discuss his latest book titled 5 Stars. Oh, this is going to be so good. So, are you ready? Let's do it.
So we have perspective in business, but we're also young enough to continue to lead great brands and build companies and lead people into this new world. I think we're in a pretty good position.
Welcome to Gen X Amplified, where we bring you inspirational and entertaining conversations with successful Gen X leaders and entrepreneurs.
This is the show created just for you. The powerful generation between the boomers and millennials to help you amplify your story,
Maximize your impact,
and become Gen Exceptional in business and in life.
Now, here's your host, Adrion Porter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gen X Amplified. This is the podcast and platform dedicated to empowering Gen X and mid-career professionals to stand out, maximize your impact, and succeed at life. This is Adrion Porter, and once again, thank you so much for listening to the show and for your time. I am really excited because I get to welcome a friend of the show because he is a repeat guest on Gen X Amplified. So he is the best-selling author of the book Talk Like TED and The Storyteller's Secret. My guest is an influential communication advisor for the world's most admired brands that touch our lives actually every day, such as Google, Intel, Coca-Cola, Allstate, LinkedIn, and others, to name a few. Now, as a very popular keynote speaker, he teaches CEOs and leaders to deliver dynamic presentations and share inspiring stories that sell products, grow brands, and motivate change. Now, he also writes for Forbes.com and Inc.com, and he is an executive instructor at Harvard University. Now, speaking of the books earlier that I mentioned, he has now returned, just like the Jedi, to Gen X Amplified to discuss his latest book to grace not only my bookshelf, but on bookshelves across the globe, which is titled 5 Stars, The Communication Secrets to Get from Good to Great. So everyone, please welcome back my friend and Gen Exceptional guest, Carmine Gallo. Carmine, what is going on?
Adrian, thank you so much for inviting me back, and thanks for that introduction. I feel like we should have applause now.
No, thank you so
great.
much.
Thank you.
I know, seriously, though, I'm humbled and excited for you to join our conversation again. I really liked our chat last time. And it was, just to remind my listeners, it was episode number 33. So I recommend all of you, please go back and listen to episode number 33 with my guest Carmine, where we discussed and unpacked his previous book called The Storyteller's Secret. And he's come back as a proud Gen Xer, as he mentioned last time. And we're going to continue the theme, Carmine, because as I mentioned, in the intro to my listeners, part of your ethos and virtue is really the power of storytelling. I mean, you help a lot of leaders, companies, brands, even me, as I mentioned on the previous episode, how your book, The Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs, was really critical and pivotal in my growth as a speaker back in the day. But I've noticed the themes of your books, whether it's Talk Like TED, The Storyteller's Secret, and this latest and greatest book, 5 Stars, just continues to cement the power of storytelling. So I'm definitely want to get a chance to unpack this book, Carmine. If you don't mind, what I want to do, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on your bio, can you just briefly, I guess, highlight some of the key moments from when you wrote and delivered Storyteller Secrets to start to craft the manuscript and this wonderful book, 5 Stars? Like, what was some of those highlight moments and what motivated you to transition to this new book?
Well, Adrian, all my books build on each other. And I am constantly on the front lines of communication. Every day, every week, I'm hearing from people around the world. I travel to places around the world. I listen to young professionals and mid-level career professionals, a lot of Gen Xers, and CEOs and billionaires. I mean, I get, and scientists and academics. I really get to learn a considerable amount about communication, storytelling, persuasion. What are some of the challenges out there? And so each book builds upon the other. After I wrote Storyteller's Secret, which continues to still remain very, very relevant, more relevant today than when I wrote it. I think storytelling within business is becoming more of a concept that people are gravitating to. So I'm really happy to see that.
Right.
But what I began to notice is every day I received comments or texts and emails on LinkedIn and on social media from people who had already established themselves in their career or were going from mid-level to leadership positions and telling me how much their books or my books help them elevate their visibility within the company. They became more visible, more successful. They were able to pitch themselves more effectively and successfully. They were able to inspire and motivate teams unlike ever before. And I realized that I need a book that's not for the beginning public speaking student. That's Talk Like TED. I think that book is a really good book for classrooms and people who are just starting to build their visibility. But we needed something a little more advanced for people who are already competent in their fields, who needed that extra layer, that extra core, that skill that would elevate them to a completely new level. And so that's kind of where I started this whole metaphor of 5 stars. But again, it was a metaphor. Average is only guarantees below average results, according to Thomas Friedman, the great globalization writer.
Right.
And good is not good enough anymore. You have to be exceptional in your career. And I found that the most exceptional people who really stood out were students of communication. I mean, the real students of communication. They not only read my books, they introduced me to a lot of concepts that I had never known before. And I'm talking about billionaires like Richard Branson, who I've interviewed face-to-face this year about the power of communication and storytelling.
Oh, that's great.
And a lot of other CEOs and professionals who used communication skills to get from their mid-level career to leadership positions. And so that's where I started focusing on 5 stars. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to tell you about what solidified that title in my mind.
Please do. Please do.
So first, again, metaphorical, right? Sort of this average to great. How do you get there? I was kind of thinking along those lines. And then I started interviewing, mostly for my social media platforms like Forbes and Inc. I began traveling and visiting leaders who were running 5-star resorts. There's very few hotels and restaurants that are legitimately 5-star, that receive 5 stars from Forbes or AAA 5 Diamond Awards. Very, very few. I think about 170 in the whole country that have Forbes 5-star.
Okay.
And so I went to some of these resorts. I went to 2 back to back, and I talked to the general managers, and I just got really immersed in the training. And they told me something really interesting. They said, Carmine, a 3-star resort is clean and acceptable. A 4-star has to have some amenities like a spa and a gym and maybe a nice location. A 5-star is rare because a 5-star creates emotional resonance between the team and the guests.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting, Adrian? Emotional resonance.
I never heard of that.
Well, neither had I. I thought, well, this is interesting. So that's how they train the employees, right? To create emotionally engaged moments for you. Well, isn't that what great leaders do? Isn't that what great persuaders do?
Exactly.
So that was one thing. Then there was another one. I started speaking to CEOs and leaders of 5-star hospitals.
Okay.
Hospitals are actually rated by patient satisfaction by the Medicare Association or by the Medicare division of the government. They're given patient satisfaction ratings. Under 5% of all hospital systems are 5-star. And yet when you look at the surveys that determine whether a hospital system or a medical center is 3, 4, or 5-star, the difference is in how the staff communicates with each other and with the patient.
Okay, I was about to say that's pretty scary when you said under 5% of a hospital. Hotel I can live with, but a hospital, I'm not sure.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, no, that's well, think about it. Patient satisfaction to get to a high level where 8 or 9 out of 10 patients say that they've had an exceptional experience at a hospital when they go into the hospital because there's a problem.
Yeah, that's true.
That's really hard to do.
Yes, exactly.
And so speaking of storytelling, I think it's actually in the book 5 Stars. I interviewed a CEO of a hospital at the UCLA Medical Center. I didn't know this. His name is Dr. David Feinberg. When he first started at UCLA was ranked very low nationwide when it comes to patient satisfaction. And obviously, patient satisfaction should result in positive outcomes too. So there's a direct correlation there. But it was near the bottom of the barrel. Within 7 years, it's what I know today, which is in the top 1% of all hospitals in the country. And it was because of one man, Adrian. It was because of one CEO who realized that they were not communicating consistently with people within the team, and they were also not involved in storytelling. And that's what comes back to storytelling. Dr. David Feinberg said, storytelling was my most important tool as a leader, because he had to start reminding his employees and reminding the teams of who their patients were. They weren't just focused on occupancy rates and how many hospital beds were occupied at any moment. Those were the metrics. But until people started to realize that there's a story behind every patient, that's when you get an engaged workforce. So again, Adrian, every great leader I talk to, there's this transition point where they have to take an organization and take it to another level. And more often than not, it has something to do with more effective communication.
That is very true. And I felt that and saw that literally throughout the book, and even through your previous books, as you mentioned earlier, Carmine. Every book has a theme and feeds off each other. As a sequel, if you will, and this book gets more into and aligns with your career progression. I think about, like you said earlier, young professionals, people that just started off speaking. Talk Like TED is a great manifesto and guide for them. Now, because of individuals, especially those listening to this show, are now ascending into those higher positions of leadership where they have to motivate, they have to influence, they have to inspire. Storytelling becomes more of a must-have skill set. And thinking about your analogies and metaphors and the stories behind the premise of 5 Stars, the title, that is very interesting. And I remember reading the book. Also, you gave another example, which I'm not sure it was another, I guess, motivator for the title, but you interviewed, or you heard about at least, the CEO of Cisco, which is a brand that I didn't really realize until you called it out, Carmine, in the book, that's very instrumental in a lot of the things that we do day to day. But storytelling and the power of presentations was such a critical skill set in the world of Cisco, where they they, I guess, empowered employees to give presentations, and they rated them on a 5-point scale. Right?
Yes. So everything I started studying reinforced this whole 5-star example. And you're absolutely right. John Chambers, who's recently retired from Cisco, but Cisco is now doing very well. They just had an excellent earnings season. They're the ones who make the plumbing, the infrastructure that makes the internet run. So they're more of a device infrastructure company.
Right.
So it can be kind of a boring company unless a communicator can really bring it to life, because they deal with technology that the average person does not see necessarily. And they rank all of their managers, and this applies to all of us. Now I know why you brought it up, because we're talking about this Gen X audience. This applies to their managers, and this is not something they say publicly, but they told me, and so I wrote it in the book.
Right.
All of their managers or senior executives, everyone from mid-level up, is rated on their presentations that they give to customers. So it's they're either rated from their peers or they're rated by their customers on a 5-point scale. I was told privately, but now it's in the book, I was told that if an employee or a manager does not make regularly 4 to 4.5 out of 5-star ratings for their presentation skills, it's really hard to get into a senior leadership position. And that started from the top. That started from John Chambers, who regularly got 4.5 from his listeners, or 4.8. So that's pretty extraordinary.
It is. And I can see how that's even very relevant for today's crowded digital marketplace, which I'm going to get into, because there's so many great nuggets that you speak to that I believe that 5 stars is such a great guide for people that are mid-career leaders, that are C-suite executives in this world of globalization, automation, AI, which is another driver why you wrote this book, because we are in this very disruptive marketplace where people, leaders, professionals, just everyday workers are, number one, concerned about the status of their employment because of all of these technology and automation, and virtual AI is being more prominent when it comes to just efficiencies at work, number one. Number two, they're being challenged because of all these new digital technologies and the level of acumen that people feel like they need to have to adjust. And then number three, because of the power of storytelling, how does story enables us as leaders to perform and excel in this new world? And that's why I feel this is so key, because of all of this globalization and disruption, technology and economy. What's going to separate you from the robots? Something that the robots...
that was another fascinating area that I got into.
Yeah.
Because I spoke to scientists. Again, there's a lot of background that's not necessarily in the book, and I'm glad we have these podcasts that we can talk through these things. What led me to write this type of book? I started interviewing scientists who contacted me who said, "Hey, Carmine, I'm in the AI field. In fact, one of the leading scientists in artificial intelligence." And he said, "Hey, thank you for writing whatever it was, Presentation Secrets, Talk Like TED, Storytellers." I said, "Well, why? How's that helping you?" They said, "Well, we have to be able to communicate what we do. Otherwise, it's completely not understandable to the average human, right?" So we have to be able to communicate well. If scientists cannot communicate well, then they don't get funding, or their ideas kind of fall on deaf ears, or they get buried. So it's very important that scientists, even the ones who are dealing with AI technologies, like at Google, they are studying communication skills and persuasion and how to communicate data and complexity more simply. Wow. So that to me was really fascinating. And I began to ask them questions like, automation is replacing millions of workers. We already know that. It's happening. Now automation and artificial intelligence are replacing more cognitive skills that were uniquely human. Where does that leave us? And the AI scientist who I talked to actually calm me down a little bit. They are not quite as scared as the media headlines are making it out to be. And they said, "Carmine, remember," and this is key. One person told me, "We can create a program that can scan faces on the internet and read human emotion. But make no mistake, a machine does not have human emotion." I said, "So what's the point of that?" They said, "A machine cannot inspire, cannot ignite your imagination and dream bigger. I thought, wow, that's really deep. I mean, that's amazing. You're right. Gary Kasparov, who was the chess grandmaster, who lost to IBM's Big Blue Technology in a very famous chess match, said he was thinking about it for many years. And I have this quote in the book, and he said, "The only thing that separates us from the machines is that we can dream. So dream bigger."
Love it. Dream bigger.
Yeah, dream bigger.
Wow.
And what we're seeing in a lot of different studies too, is that machines can replicate, can pass a test to get into elite colleges. They can pass standardized tests, but they cannot beat about 20% of the population. The 20% who are better writers, speakers, collaborators, creative thinkers, because that's not the way the machines work. But a machine can replicate something that's been done. A machine cannot be inspired by connecting two things two fields or two ideas that have never been connected before. And so this whole idea of creativity, collaboration, communication, those soft skills, for lack of a better word, are more important today than ever before. Interesting, isn't that, Adrian? It sounds counterintuitive, but this is what I've been told by scientists, academics, historians, and economists who I interviewed. That the idea of being persuasive and a better communicator today is more important than ever in human history.
I definitely can see that. I mean, if thinking about all of the information and just the takeaways from the data that the scientists gave you, I think more so solidifies it. And I didn't realize that they were thinking of those dynamics internally. But when I think about the economy we're in, Carmine, now, the knowledge economy, if you will, we're in the knowledge economy, I can see why the power of story and emotion would become more relevant. However, not many people would know how to effectively utilize that. I think we can internally say, well, maybe a robot can't affect change the way a human can from an emotional standpoint. But then what do you do? And that's why I think that this book is a great guide to help people uncover and unlock and unpack some of the key action items to do that. And first of all, there's so many nuggets from this book. It's not only.
Well, now you understand, Adrian, why I had to write a book.
You had to.
This doesn't fit in a Facebook post. I had to explore this idea how we came to this place. That takes a little time.
It takes a little time, and also takes a little philosophy and history lesson too. Because when I read the book, and I literally went back in time and started to remember all of these key nuggets and diamonds of Aristotle, which I forgot. And you do a great job, Carmine. So ethos, logos, and pathos, which you brought back to my frame of mind and really outlines the father, who you call the father of persuasion, Aristotle. And he really broke down the power of logos, but specifically pathos, which means, and I may be butchering all of this, so you can correct me, Carmine. But ethos, I believe that's where it's your character and your credibility. Then you have logo.
Yeah, that's your resume, Adrian. So if you're looking for a job, let's make this real practical.
Let's do
job
it.
interview to get to elevate to the next position.
Okay.
Aristotle 2,000 years ago said ethos is your credibility.
Okay.
To me, that's your resume. That's what you've done.
Got it.
Okay, go to the next one.
All right. Logos.
Okay, logos is logic,
data,
the evidence to back your argument. So you're arguing, but you're asking your boss for a promotion. Here is, my experience. Here's what I've done. Here is how much I have. By what percentage I've increased sales in my division. That's the logos.
Got it.
But what is it missing, Adrian?
It is missing that inherent emotional element, pathos.
Persuasion, according to Aristotle, cannot occur in the absence of emotion. And we're learning this now in the lab. And this has become very clear in the last 10 years.
Right.
That people, all of us, every single one of us, we think that all of our actions are based on rational judgment and evaluation of the information. And that's not true. In fact, it's being shown that you cannot make a rational judgment without emotion. So it's all, it all gets kind of convoluted there. But it's really fascinating, the fact that all of every act that you make is based somewhat on emotion. So you have to be able to connect with people emotionally, and that's where persuasion really happens. That's why I talk about storytelling as one element. Let's not forget, storytelling is just one rhetorical tool that we have to express our ideas to another person. Mm-hmm. But within that broader context, there's so many other areas that I explored in 5 stars, which is the whole Act 3. Act 3 is all about the tools to sharpen that persuasive edge. Can I tell you one that's been on my mind quite a bit, because it's
yes, please do.
Actually in the news quite a bit as well. Metaphor. That's an element of persuasion.
Okay.
And it's an element of storytelling. A lot of people don't think about that. We think in metaphorical terms. We think in analogy. Every time we are exposed to something new, we are trying to figure out something in our mind. We're going through our mental database to compare it to something that's relevant to us. And that's why really good communicators use metaphor and analogy, those kind of comparisons, more often than average communicators. Let me give you an example.
Yes.
Warren Buffett.
Okay.
Real student of persuasion and communication. A Financial Times article by a reporter who covers Warren Buffett said, it's weird. It's almost like he can't get through a sentence without using an analogy. It's true. So you start looking back at his most famous quotes. His most famous quotes are either metaphors or analogies, but it's a comparison. When asked, give us your philosophy on investing. That's an abstract topic. Okay. Think about that. How do you answer, give me your philosophy on investing on a CNBC interview that's 3 minutes long? Where do you start?
Right.
You go to a metaphor. He said, this is the way I look at investing. I try to find companies that are like, okay, there's the analogy,
okay,
economic castles protected by an impenetrable moat. That is a big, broad, strong moat around the castle that makes it hard for competitors to enter.
I like that.
That's interesting, right?
Yes.
Not too long ago, something that went viral is when he gave an interview about the healthcare system in America.
Okay.
And he said healthcare is the tapeworm in the American economy. And that line went viral because if you think about it, wow, what a good description. Like as healthcare grows to 17 now to 20% of the GDP, that's an abstract concept. What does that mean? Right. Oh, tapeworm. Ooh, that's kind of gross. It's eating away at the infrastructure.
Right.
Now I get it. That's the point. That the reason why people pick out. You can give a speech, a presentation, a conversation, and the media or your listener will pick out that one line. That one line is typically the metaphor, the analogy. It's because, and again, this is something I've learned in the last decade or so, it's because that's the way our minds are wired to process information. So the more you know about how the mind works, which I've tried to do in 5 stars as much as possible, without making it too complex, the more you know about how the mind works, the more persuasive you can be.
That that is true. I just think about Warren Buffett now. Now he's the storyteller in my mind because he paints.
And don't forget, Adrian. I'm sorry to interrupt here. Don't forget, Warren Buffett has this great story where he's very public about it. He was terrified of public speaking when he first started as a career professional in the financial industry.
Okay,
he admits that openly. I was terrified of public speaking. So he enrolled in a public speaking course to get over it. A little known story, which I put in my book. He paid $100 for the program and he dropped out. He lost his $100 because he was too afraid to speak up in front of the class. That's how afraid of public speaking he was. And then he took it a second time and he passed it. And he said, that's one of the most important classes that he's ever taken. It wasn't necessarily the financial course. That was one important class.
Right.
The second one was public speaking. And he said, with that is the best investment you can make, is to become a better public speaker. Isn't that interesting?
That is very interesting. I would vouch for that. I think in today's society and marketplace, especially for leaders, that is, and I'm sure you could vouch for it because you're Carmine Gallo, the author of Storyteller Secret, that as leaders, that is one of the most effective skills that you can really nurture and hone. And even, like you said, Warren Buffett, who's this multi-billionaire, he got over his fears and he became better storyteller, painting those visual pictures of castles and tapeworms and moats in your brain. So
exactly. He uses many, many more.
Wow.
Richard Branson is another person who I've interviewed personally, face to face, which is amazing when you meet him, because he's the most authentic CEO I've ever met. He's exactly the way you picture him.
Wow,
he's
very
just
authentic.
Cool. He's super cool.
Yes.
And authentic and natural. And he talks a great deal about storytelling.
I'm sorry, did you interview him on a Virgin plane by any chance? Or
okay, so the first time I interviewed him, you'd appreciate this, it was on a Virgin plane.
Oh, wow.
It was on Virgin America from Los Angeles to Las Vegas.
Love it.
And then I got to party with the guy. He is the partier and the worker. So he works all day. He travels around the world. He's constantly got a smile on his face, and then he parties at night. He's like he really is like that commercial, the most interesting man in the world. He really is. So that's the first time I interviewed him. But I had, at the time, that was a few years ago.
Right.
I didn't know he was really into storytelling. I didn't know that.
Okay.
And then I started reading blogs that he wrote where he said this in one blog in particular, I don't think you could be a successful entrepreneur today without being a good storyteller. And so this year, his new book came out, and I had the opportunity when he visited near where I live outside of San Francisco, to sit down with him face to face. And we talked specifically about that. And he said, yeah, absolutely. If you can't tell a good story, I think you're going to be left behind. And that went into 5 stars too.
That is great. I can definitely see just from reading his books, like a Virgin. I've read a couple of his books. I haven't read his latest book yet, but I can definitely see that. And now I didn't get your call, Carmine, from you when you were hanging out with Richard. So I missed that call by chance, man. You got it. But
got to party with Richard.
Party with Richard. What we think about this book and this audience, and we touched on it a little bit earlier, but this book was literally.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. No, this book was literally tailor-made.
That's my friend Rocky. He's here too.
Hey, wait, his name is Rocky?
Look,
no, you have no idea how much of a Rocky franchise fan I am. So that's a whole other conversation. So that's what my ears perked up when you said that. Love it.
We can have an entire conversation, which we don't have to now.
Oh, no.
We can have an entire conversation on why Rocky, the movie, is the greatest movie story arc of all time. I've talked to screenwriters about it, but we can save that for another.
Okay, we are going to save it because I'm not going to get into it because I'm going to get really geeky right now because I am literally a diehard fan. I mean, from him writing the screenplay in his little room in his apartment to pitching. All right, so let's move on.
Make sure we share emails because I'll tell you a little bit more about that one, and we can do that for a whole nother podcast.
We will. So getting back to Gen X Amplified. Look, our audience, people that are like us, Gen Xers that are depending upon where you are in your professional career. Right now, we are either looking to elevate and move into leadership positions, or we're already leaders and we're trying to motivate not only our companies, but our employees, especially millennials. How would you say, or what would you say, Carmine, are some of those key nuggets of 5 stars and the power of persuasion that will help Gen X leaders build their brand? Because at the end of the day, I'm really into brand building and amplifying your story and nurturing relationships. How can we as Gen Xers become better persuaders and storytellers to affect change and really accelerate in our career in this disrupted economy?
I'll tell you one that has been. I'll tell you one specific technique that has been brought to my attention again, just in the last few weeks. Make sure that it's okay to share your origin story. It's okay, in fact, it's celebrated, to share your stories of failure and how you overcame those failures. There is research now that's come out since my book that confirms this. They're finding that when leaders and CEOs, I think the survey was done with CEOs, but this applies to any aspiring leaders, that when people share their stories of challenge and overcoming hurdles or adversity and being transformed by that adversity, that is a very powerful way of connecting a person to another individual, that it serves to motivate teams. They call it, and there's an academic term, I had never heard of it before, so I'm just starting to study it. It's called benign envy. Benign envy. That means you're listening to this story. You just mentioned the Rocky story. Okay, so you're listening to this story of someone who's in a hole and he's in a lot of trouble and he can't pay his bills, and then he writes his way out of that circumstance with Rocky. That becomes benign envy. So, in other words, you envy that story. Not that you want to be him, not that you're jealous, but it's a benign sort of envy, and it motivates you, it inspires you.
Wow.
They're doing a lot of research into this, and part of it I wrote about in 5 stars. It's really important to share those stories of struggle, hardship, adversity, and how you overcame that hardship, because those stories are how emotionally we're bound together as human beings, because struggle is a part of nature. And so people want to hear about struggle, but they also want to hear about the transformation at the end, which is the formula, Adrian, and you would know this, to any great Hollywood movie.
That is true.
Yeah.
Yes.
So don't be afraid of sharing those stories of struggle, hardship, and adversity. Howard Schultz does this all the time. Remember, Howard Schultz is the chairman, well, no longer, he's retired,
Yes.
is the chairman of Starbucks.
Yes.
Everybody remembers the story of how Howard Schultz grew up poor in a Brooklyn housing project. His father got hurt on the job. And when I say everybody, I mean like everybody within Starbucks knows the story. His father got hurt on the job. He had no health insurance, no way of making ends meet. And Howard Schultz at a young age said to himself, I'm never going to let that happen to anybody who I lead. And that became the foundation for why Starbucks became the first major company to offer full health benefits to part-time employees. And why today they offer, they're hiring thousands of veterans or giving college tuition to their employees. That's what's called a signature or foundational story in the academic literature. But essentially what that means is it's a story of overcoming hurdles or hardship and being transformed by the experience. Remember, Rocky didn't win, Adrian.
I know.
Right? He didn't win.
He just made it
transformed by the experience, which is a better ending. In Hollywood, sometimes it's a better ending than just the victory.
That is true. He didn't. He didn't. And at the end of the day, like he said when he was laying down after that run with Adrian, I just want to go the distance. But I can't beat him.
Very good memory. You really are a diehard Rocky fan.
I was serious, man. I am a Look, we're gonna do that other episode. I am not playing. But so.
Well, you may have noticed, Adrian, and this is very on topic. You may have noticed in 5 stars, I have a lot of references to Hollywood screenwriters.
Yes.
Because being in California, I've had the opportunity to interview screenwriters. I love screenplays, and they're great storytellers. So they understand how to keep your emotion going. And so I see a lot of relevance and connection between a great Hollywood screenplay and a great presentation. How do you keep that emotion building? How do you keep it going?
Yes, I love it. I think, we're joking about Rocky, but there's still a lot of great key principles like from that story, and the fact that he did, really was consistent, and he took pain and tragedy and turned it into triumph. And he wrote the screenplay. Not only did he just write the screenplay, he said he had to play the part. And they were, the studios were dead set. Look, if Rocky wasn't persistent, we would have had Paul Newman or Burt Reynolds as Rocky Balboa. So, and that's a true story. So
let me tell you another story that fits into this topic of being open with your origin story.
Okay.
True story. Who am I talking about? A man who struggled in school because he had a disorder at the time, was misunderstood. He suffered from dyslexia, and he failed at school and dropped out of school. He started a magazine that became somewhat successful, and he was transformed by the experience. He was not lazy and dumb like his teachers told him, but he actually was brilliant because he could think in a very different way than everybody else. So he turned what most people would have seen as a weakness into a strength. And that man is Richard Branson.
Wow.
He tells that story quite frequently. You probably know part of that story. The dropout that became a billionaire. Right. Why does he tell that story? Again, it's this origin story that connects us to one another. Most people, especially business professionals, are very reluctant to talk about any of their failures or how they overcame certain adversities. They're very reluctant. They have to keep it professional. Well, but look at what the billionaires are doing. Howard Schultz or Richard Branson. They speak in a very different way than the majority of business professionals. I'm sure many of your readers or your listeners read Phil Knight's book.
Oh, yes.
The Nike CEO, the Nike founder.
Yes.
That's all about hurdles and overcoming these what seemed as though insurmountable hurdles at the time, because people like those kind of stories of adversity, hurdles, struggle, and success.
They do. And what's great, and it actually feeds into my mission with this show and a lot of what I do on the outside with respect to empowering Gen Xers, and your book as well, because one of the things that Gen X as a generation, if you will, and the brand of Gen X that we have is that a lot of times we're overlooked, and we are that generation that the top generation we call the divorce generation. We were the latchkey kids. We were forgotten. Even today, because of the behemoth 80 million plus millennials and the 77 million boomers, we're squeezed. And so there aren't a lot of stories being told. However, what I do now when I speak or consult or encourage other Gen Xers, you need to tell not only the successes, but talk about how you were transformed by the experience of being laid off, because there are a lot of Gen Xers even now, because of disruption and millennials and the volume of millennials are coming in and cost cutting, that when they're looking to get the job done with lesser pay or salaries that the companies have to pay out, many Gen Xers or mid-career professionals are being squeezed out. And they're struggling, and it's a pain point. I'm not saying that is something that is good, but however, there are ways to overcome that. And what I try to do now, even when I go out and talk about my story, like I am a quintessential Gen Xer. My parents got divorced when I was 7. I've been laid off a number of times, but you know what? I've looked for ways where I can be transformed by the X and the X in experience, and just talk about it, but also look at how I can encourage others. And I think, Carmine, that is a great analogy, and it's something that, I think Gen Xers should be encouraged to talk more about their successes, because I still feel there is an opportunity for Gen Xers in this crowded marketplace to talk about their successes and tell their story, how they're contributing to the success of a company, but also just be able to embrace some of those failures, but also how you are transformed by them. So I love that you're focusing on effective ways to do that. Through Adrian, the power of storytelling.
We're in a sweet spot. So think about it. We are in a sweet spot, we, the Gen X generation, because we have the experience. We have the benefit of time and seeing booms and busts and cycles. And we know that history kind of repeats itself in so many ways. We have perspective that a lot of young people don't. Warren Buffett often talks, he's obviously not a Gen Xer, but he talks about how the reason why he can keep an even keel is because he has perspective. He's been investing since 1945, so nothing surprises him. So we have perspective in business, but we're also young enough to continue to lead great brands and build companies and lead people into this new world. I think we're in a pretty good position. Yeah. And that's why I think it's really important to refine and hone and sharpen your skills of persuasion. It's not something that's just naturally kind of built into everybody. And a lot of 20-year-olds don't really have it yet. But as a Gen Xer, you have that experience. You have a little more communication background behind you. And you now have, with books like 5 Stars, you've got some very specific, tangible ways of elevating yourself to that next level. And that's why this is not a basic how to be a better public speaker and how to stand up and get more eye contact. That's sort of a basic public speaking book, and that's not what this is. Right. This is people who are already good at what they do. Right. They want to become exceptional, standouts.
Yes, love it, love it. Become standouts, good at what you do. Become exceptional, Gen exceptional. As I say, standouts. I
like that.
I love it. I love it. So speaking of stories, so we can talk so long about this book, but time is time, but we're definitely going to continue this probably at another time. But I don't want to leave this conversation without asking you the Gen X Amplified final question. And you, since you were on the show before, you gave an answer previously, but you may have something new for us. So Carmine, if you were walking down the street and there was a song that would play when you walk down the street or when you enter a room that matches your story and the brand of Carmine Gallo today, what song would that be? What would be your own personal theme song?
I love those kind of questions. That's great. I'm a big country fan, but that would be kind of hard because most of today's country music has to do with beer, girls, and trucks. So I'm not sure if that would be my theme song today. My theme song is probably one of the songs I really enjoy recently is U2's Beautiful Day.
Oh,
Beautiful Day by
yes.
U2. It's just got this bright, uplifting theme to it, which I love because I think we need to be uplifted, and the more perspective you have on the world, and I go into this in 5 Stars, the more you realize that this is an amazing time, not only to be alive in all of human civilization, but the opportunities that we have today are greater than ever before, despite all of the disruption that's happening. So wow. I think you need to have an attitude of gratitude every day and be happy that you are in this sweet spot that we've been talking about.
Wow. Well, I have definitely a level of gratitude. I thank you so much. And I'm grateful for you coming back on the show. This was a sweet spot for me, and I always love talking to you. And I think that, this conversation and this book and 5 Stars will help a lot of people listening in and my audience become more uplifted. Can you let everyone know, Carmine, the best way that they can continue to just keep up with all of your literary genius and speaking and just things that you're doing, and also how they can directly buy the book?
If you can simply remember my name, Carmine Gallo, you can find me and my books on Amazon or wherever books are sold now. Right. And actually, interestingly, I won't really get into this, but the audiobook is doing really well. This is the first time, 5 Stars, this is the first time when there's this transition point where audiobooks and Audible is soaring.
Wow.
More so than some of the other platforms. So it's really cool to see. But you can buy 5 Stars in hardcover on Kindle or on audiobook or an Audible if you'd like. If you remember my name, Carmine Gallo, you can find me online, carminegallo.com, or go to Amazon, type in Carmine Gallo. And there's a landing page that's just for the book. Okay. It's called the5starsbook.com. The5starsbook.com. But if you just go to my website, carminegallo.com, you can go to it directly. And I urge people to go to the website before they consider buying the book, because it's got videos, it has endorsements by people like Tony Robbins and others, it gives you more information about the book. What might get you more excited.
Yeah, love it. The endorsements are great. I love Tony, and I'm actually a big Adam Grant fan. I'm a huge fan of originals, and he gave a really great endorsement of the book.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. I'm glad you like that.
Love that. So everyone, I encourage you, all of my Gen X exceptional audience, pick up the book, especially leaders, professionals, entrepreneurs. You're looking to accelerate your career, just really want to affect massive change and inspire others. Pick up 5 stars, The Communication Secrets to get from good to great. Carmine, as always, it has been a pleasure.
Thank you, Adrian. Thanks for inviting me again.
Take care. Okay, back again. Mr. Carmine Gallo, highly acclaimed speaker, trainer, communications coach, and author of his latest book titled 5 Stars, which we discussed. The Communication Secrets to Get from Good to Great. Now, if you're looking to develop not only as a speaker, but just to also become a better and effective leader and advance in your career, you definitely must go out and pick up this book. I highly recommend it. So again, as always, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. And remember, to get the full show notes, go to genxamplified.com, and you can also find Gen X Amplified on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts on your mobile device, which is primarily how I listen to podcasts. Now, also, don't forget to go over to iTunes and give us a rating and review if you have enjoyed this podcast. I truly would appreciate it. Now, again, I'm your host, Adrian Porter, and you've been listening to Gen X Amplified, the personal brand podcast dedicated to you, the powerful and exceptional generation between the boomers and millennials. Remember, it's more than a podcast. It is a movement. Take care.